Welcome to another episode of The Molten Truth. I'm your host, Zoey Michaels, and we are here today with another wonderful artist, in this case, an author. And we're welcoming to our studio Kristine Jensen. Kristine, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Zoe. I'm very pleased to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you. As those who watch my program have gotten used to, especially in most recent episodes, I tend to get so excited about whatever we're talking about that I found that if I wait to ask about an author's website, that it's very probably entertaining for the audience, but very awkward for me. So we're going to get that out of the way right off the bat. Kristine, I assume that you have a website. Where would people find information about you and your books?
I do have a website, and it's easy to find information on www.wednesday-club.com. And you can find information about my debut novel and more about the history behind it, who I am. I also publish monthly blogs, and you can find the blogs on there too.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that and saving me the awkwardness later on in our either at the end where I'm like, oh wait, can you do this moment. So thank you. So
Yeah,
this is your
thank you.
first book then.
Yes, it is. It is my first novel. I've been a writer a long time. All my career has been in writing, but this is my first novel. So I'm late to the game, and loving every minute of it.
That's beautiful. Better to late than never. Sometimes it takes us a while to, I think, have enough experiences that we actually pour over into a point where we want to pull that into a book and to share with the world. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's kind of how my experience was.
I think that's true, and I think also there's a certain amount of timing. Being in a place where you can make the time and space for what it is that you want to do, and also courage. Writing a novel and putting it out there for the world takes some courage, and
Yes.
maybe I'm kind of more slow to that, but
Nothing wrong with that.
yeah, it took me a while.
Yeah. Did you have any help getting you to that stage? Maybe someone pushing you, encouraging you, or circumstances in life that finally said, okay, you know what, this is the time.
I made a big change in my life in my 50s. I moved away from the state of California, where I had been for over 30 years and raised a son. I went through a divorce and I moved to a completely different state, kind of started over my life, and ended up meeting a lot of other women writers who were so inspirational to me. And though I had been writing marketing copy and video scripts all my career, writing fiction was a whole different ball of wax for me. And I think that being in community with them and seeing their courage and being able to put out my work and get feedback and encouragement from them, it really made a difference for me.
That's so nice. Not everyone gets to have that experience, and it's such a touchy thing. I other than some writers in my family tree, none that are alive and well today, unfortunately, but ones that I grew up knowing that they were writers when they were alive. I haven't really met anyone face to face who's a writer, except of course through this contact. Um, so when I set off on my journey, I was kind of on my own. But then here's the danger is that you get all these people approaching you via email or whatever, claiming to be writers, claiming, they want to hear about your process, how you're going. And then, of course, their ultimate agenda is to sell you a service. And whether that's something valid or something fraudulent, you have to kind of feel your way and figure it out. 9 times out of 10, it appears to be fraudulent. That's been my experience, at least.
I've
Um,
really run into that a ton since
yeah.
since publishing Wednesday Club, it was something that I completely wasn't expecting. Um, I don't know how these scammers kind of find you, but they do. And they promise all kinds of things, from how to market your book and how to get more sales and how to revise the description to get more readers. And, you're right, like 90% of it really, 90% of them really are scams. And you have to be really careful out there, because the scammers can look really legit.
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah, you just have to be so careful. On the upside, those emails definitely bolster my ego while I read them. I'm like, oh, you like my
I know.
work and this, and oh, that's so great to hear. Thank you. And then delete.
Exactly. I'm so drawn to your beautiful story. I found your book and it warmed my heart. And yeah, I know they know how to get us. And
Yeah,
in the beginning, I was like, wow, how are all these people finding my book? It's I don't know. It is pretty interesting. And on the other hand, there are wonderful resources out there.
yeah,
You
oh yeah,
know,
absolutely. Yeah,
publicists and editors and other people willing to read and review your book, and so you just have to focus on those positive parts.
well, exactly right. I was so grateful early on when I launched this podcast, which was my only safe way to market myself that I could figure out in the early days. Um, I found a fellow podcaster that I was interviewing who then introduced me to your publicist, who then started giving me these wonderful writers to talk to, in addition to other people I've sourced myself. Because I love talking to musicians because that's a personal interest. One day I would love to talk to a chef. I just love to talk about food. I mean, who doesn't, right?
Yeah,
Food, we love it.
for
um,
sure.
but yeah, I mean, I've been so impressed not only with the talent that your publicist has sent my way, but with the service he provides them, and it's enough to make me think, okay, when I'm ready, I still have a few hoops to jump through, but I know exactly who I'm going to be hiring. So it's nice to know that because of all the positive feedback I've received from his clients.
Yeah, he really is amazing. Are we allowed to say his name, or should we maybe not?
I don't know, free advertising for Mickey? Why not?
Mickey Mickelson, he's the
Yeah,
best. He's really amazing. Yeah, I have a funny story about how I met him.
yeah, go
I
for it.
was at the South Dakota Festival of Books. My novel is set in South Dakota, and I was there last September, and he was there, and he was raffling off some of his services, and I didn't really know much about. I knew something about a publicist, but I was like, I don't think, with one novel and my first novel, that I'm really in a place to hire a publicist. But I was kind of curious about it. And so one of the days of the festival, I was in the coffee shop very early, sitting by myself having breakfast. And Mickey came in and he was there. And normally I'm not like this, I'm kind of shy, but I thought, what do I have to lose? And so I came over to his table and I plopped down and I said, could I have breakfast with you? And
I love it.
he said, okay. And I introduced myself and I was like, I know that, you're a publicist here, but I don't know really anything about what you do or what you provide. And so then he told me, and, I got to know him and I was like, oh, I think, this might be a really lovely fit. So, but I'll kind of never forget his face when I plopped down.
I bet that's a great story.
Yeah, and he was very, very gracious and letting a stranger eat breakfast with him.
Absolutely. And I could see you taking that moment and that episode in your life perhaps changing the characters, changing who, what kind of agent you're talking about. But that could definitely be a scene in a book. It could make for a very wonderful, funny, inspiring scene in a book for the future. So,
I've kind of learned to trust those times when your gut kind of tells you to do something and pushes you beyond like what you might normally be comfortable doing. And there's a few times in my life that I've like pushed myself to do those things and they've paid off. I think part of it is thinking like, well, what's the worst that could happen, right? He could call over the waitress and ask for me to be thrown out or something, but it's probably going to turn out okay.
yeah, and it sure did for both of you. You got a
It
wonderful
did.
publicist. He got himself a great client. Win-win. All it
Exactly.
cost him was a little bit of his breakfast time.
For sure. Exactly. Yeah. So I'm curious about you starting the podcast. I'd love to hear more about that. It's so wonderful that all these great podcasts are out there and people have an opportunity to, like you said, be a fly on the wall for some interesting conversations, right?
Absolutely. Well, it's funny you asked that because like literally this month, an article I wrote about this podcast just was published in a magazine, courtesy of Mickey. He had asked, several podcasters, do you want to put an article into this magazine that's coming out? So the magazine was just released this month. It's about podcasters. And so my article is titled Letting the Guests Shine, which is always my goal with every episode. And I have to tell you, I am not someone who sits down and listens to podcasts unless I have a specific purpose in listening, like I'm looking for information. So podcasting was really not in my thoughts to do initially. It's not one of those things I had a dream that one day I'd have a podcast. Not even close. Um, but after having published three books within short succession, because I had been working on it, but then I tried the first one, and of course, School of Hard Knocks, not having any guidance. Figured, okay, well, let me try and tweak it. Let me try this second book, and let's try this again. And I tried to hire professionals um, who weren't so professional. Even though they appeared to have credentials, I had done my research. It just, but was not happy. It was not good. So, in my stumbling around in the dark, I happened to stumble upon this very nice lady. I have no idea what her name was, but she had responded to one of the advertisements I'd done myself through social media. And she was a life coach, and she's offered me 20 minutes of her time. So she and I spoke over the phone, and she's like, what does an author do? What is the job description? How do what do you think an author needs to be doing? And she kind of walked me through that way. And one of the things we decided with that conversation was that even though I had never envisioned even being a guest on someone's podcast, that I would reach out and I would take that first step. I would reach out to be someone's guest. And thank goodness I was a guest on a very wonderful podcast with a really nice host who really knew what he was doing, who did not have a specific agenda. I mean, his overall theme was about trauma and grief, but that aside, he didn't want to put you in a little box of his own making. Some podcasters do. Um, but I had such a nice experience that even midway as I'm talking to him, I'm thinking, I could do this.
Yes.
And so after a few more positive experiences and a few negative ones, I decided that I needed to create my own podcast. And I had this vision of a specific niche that I didn't think existed. Actually, it really doesn't exist. And I felt like it needed to be served. But that niche proved to be too narrow, and the people I most wanted to talk to were too traumatized. So I had to reinvent, tweak, figure out, okay, how do I broaden this and not scare away the people I would like to talk to, and just have a show where I get to talk to people who may or may not have been down that scary road. And maybe we just see what happens. So the Molten Truth was born.
Lovely. And I bet that you've just met some really amazing people over these podcasts. And I know for me being a guest on podcasts, I always come away feeling like I've made a new friend. And
Definitely.
it's just so lovely, the conversations, and it's been really fun being a guest. So I can only imagine you're doing this a lot more often, and meeting all these guests. It must be really fun.
It's had some really great moments. I've met a lot of great people, as you said, with amazing stories. Some that I've actually been like, "Ooh, I can learn from you. This is something I can do in my own life. Thank you." And others I've been like, "Well, it's been nice talking to you. You're a fascinating person, but I hope my audience enjoys." um, and some of them have actually even come back for a second round, which has been very, very nice. Sometimes talking to them the second time around, being able to dig a little more deeply, ask follow-up questions, see what's new. That's also been nice. So odds are you and
I
I will
kind
talk
of
again.
Yeah, that would be lovely. I often think, it used to be that when you would be on the airplane, seems like people
Mm,
would talk to each other a lot more. And
yes.
then COVID came and we wore our masks, and that all stopped. And I do a lot of traveling for work. And so I spend time on airplanes. And pre-COVID, I could have the most, if somebody was up for talking, I was up for talking. And you just sit there and you're complete strangers, and you find connections, right? It's like finding that connection, hearing their story, and the same thing, you kind of walk away after an hour or so feeling like you've made a new friend. And that I love that. I just really love that.
Well, and think of all the missed opportunities. You're talking about that, and I'm thinking back to like the early 1980s when my aunt traveled to Germany because of a school trip that my grandfather had worked out that she could join. On the way home from that plane trip, she met a man who lived one town over, who they had been all over the same places in northwest Indiana. They had never met until that plane trip home, and she married him. So,
I knew
what
you were
type of
going to
missed
say that.
opportunities are people missing out on? They're lonely, they want to have a relationship. Well, take off the headphones, talk. You never know what's going to happen. You're going to find out that they're one town over and you've got people in common that you didn't know you had in common, and hello, there you go.
I love that. I had a feeling that's the way that story was going. I'll tell you, when I first moved to Eugene, Oregon, which was I think 14 years ago, and I was mentioning that I kind of left everything. I left my friends. I left um, my book club that I had been in for 20 years, and went to start a new life. And I just knew that I was going to really need the community of women that I had found in a book club. And so when I got here to Eugene, I looked around for a book club to join, and I couldn't find one. Nobody was up for having a new member, or it was a very large, like, library book club with 40 members that wasn't really what I was looking for.
Yeah.
And so I thought, I think I'm going to have to start my own book club. And because of that traveling, I would be on airplanes, coming back usually from the Bay Area to Eugene. And if I would happen to be sitting by a woman reading, I would then start the conversation. Oh, do you like to read? Are you in a book club? Would you like to be in a book club? And I started the club with two members who I had met on airplanes. And,
Oh,
then we picked up a few more members. But yeah, we making the best of those airplane connections. It's
yes.
pretty fun.
There's another book waiting for you to write, Airplane Connections.
There you go.
Good play on words, too. So, are
Yeah,
these
exactly.
fellow book club members also from Eugene, Oregon, or were they just
Yes, they
happened to
were
be?
from Eugene. They were coming back, traveling back home to Eugene. So, yeah, so that, that really worked out great. And it was also kind of one of those examples of sometimes you have to put yourself out a bit beyond your normal comfort zone to
Mm-hmm.
make things happen. And I really found that when I moved here and only knew um, one person who would become my husband, but I knew no one else. And in my 50s, it was harder to make friends. And I found that I had to push myself beyond where I'd had to in the past in order find to find some friends because we need our women communities, right? We need them for all kinds of reasons.
So
But
true.
sometimes you have to work hard to build that community.
Absolutely. So it's been about somewhere between 15 and 20 years since I was last in Eugene, Oregon. So I have to
Ah,
ask, is it more like still about the medium sized town, or has it grown quite a lot in the last 15, 20 years?
I think it's about 175,000 people. So
Okay. So
compared to
probably
where
smaller.
I had come from in the Bay Area, it felt small.
Yeah.
And it also felt easy and nice and kind of maybe a little more warm or something
Yeah. Well, I'm
than
sure coming
big
from the
cities in
San Francisco
California.
Bay Area, I'm sure.
Yeah, for sure, exactly.
Yeah,
But
Bay
it's a
Area has
really great
amazing stuff
town.
to do, but Oregon has its perks.
It really does. Eugene is a lovely college town, so we get a lot of cultural events
Yeah,
that come to this community because of the university, which makes it really
nice.
nice. Yeah,
And is there an airport nearby? Because I'm picturing you going to Portland for the airport, but maybe
there actually is a Eugene airport.
is there? Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, and it's pretty good, and I can fly in and out of the Eugene airport because
Okay.
Portland is 2 hours away, so
I
that
was
makes a
thinking,
long
yeah,
trip to get to an airport. Yeah, it's got a
absolutely. But
great little
I'm
airport.
sure there was a time. But yeah, I was picturing it about midway down, almost not quite to the coast, like maybe an hour inland from the coast, maybe.
It's about 40 minutes, 45 minutes
Yeah,
inland from the coast, and it's
and about
straight
midway
down.
through the yeah.
Exactly, about midway down the state, straight down from Portland on
Yeah,
I-5.
that's what I was kind of
Beautiful.
remembering. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
and
beautiful. And right now, with all the blossoms and the green, it's really pretty.
I bet. That's one thing I did love about. I lived in Oregon for a couple of years up near
Oh,
Portland, and I loved the way the mountains shone like diamonds. Those white, glistening mountains were just beautiful, and I think that's the one thing I specifically miss about the Pacific Northwest is those beautiful mountains. So,
so beautiful. And all that green that comes, of course, from, the rain in the rain and the gloom in the winter. But, it's just
yes.
you gotta have that in order to have all the amazing green that is a part of our spring and summer.
Exactly. The U.S.'s answer probably to Ireland, as far as
Probably, yeah. I haven't been
similar
there, but I
weather.
bet.
Yeah, in my
I would think
imagination, that's how it would be. So one day I'll have to
exactly.
go travel there and find out for sure. But that sounds right to me. The
Yeah.
green and the rain and all that. But so tell me about this Wednesday club that inspired the book.
When my grandmother passed away, we found a box. I found a box of items, books of minutes from over 60 years of her Wednesday Club that had met monthly. They were a real group of farm women from South Dakota, and they met to help out their community. They talked about current affairs. uh, I'm sure they shared a little gossip, and they had food, but it was a really important community gathering for these farm women, and they ran their meetings by strict parliamentary procedure and kept
Wow.
minutes. So they were, they took themselves seriously. It was They saw themselves as an important part of the community. And when I found the minutes, it inspired a fictional story, because I could just envision a group of really interesting farm women. But what could make the story interesting, I thought, was if a city girl was dumped at her grandparents' farm, and
Yep.
somehow she was included in this group of Wednesday Club women who helped her find a sense of home in a place that she did not want to be. So that's kind of what kicked off the original story.
I like it. I like that's where your mind went, because that's exactly what the kind of story I would want to read. It's cool that these farm women had this and they were very strict, but having someone who's like a fish out of water to bring all that forward, it just makes sense. So that is excellent.
Exactly. And it was fun creating characters who, each had their own story, and they each were going through their own sort of trials and tribulations. And I could come up with characters who were quirky or funny or had a challenging past or were dealing with a challenging relationship. I was able to create women who were felt like real women to me, dealing with real issues. So
I like
that made it really fun.
cool. Now, when you met Mickey, when you were there in South Dakota where you met him, had you already finished writing this book? Were you in the process, or had you just found those notes?
I had finished the book. So I had published the book in July, and I was at the South Dakota Festival of Books. I came as an exhibitor,
Oh,
to show my book there. And
wonderful.
yeah, yeah, I met Mickey there. So the book was done. The book took me about 5 years to finish. And I spent about three writing and a couple of years querying to see if I could get an agent. And
Yeah.
finally, as I saw where the publishing industry was going, and I saw that the stigma that used to be in place for self published books was really changing,
Yeah.
and that there were a lot of advantages to self publishing. And so that's what I did. I immersed myself in learning what does it take to self-publish a book. I gave myself a crash course in that for about 3 months,
Yeah.
and then published Wednesday Club.
Excellent. I'm glad. And I'm glad you didn't let that hold you back. You look at musicians, I'll never forget sometime in the last decade, I don't remember the musician, but the one who made himself famous just by posting on YouTube. If you can have indie musicians, why not have indie authors? And I don't know what else out there could be independent indie, but if you can dream it, do it.
Exactly. Yeah. Did you self-publish, Zoe?
I did. I just felt like I had a message I wanted to get out there. I did not have the patience to go through whatever channels that, may or may not yield an agent. And I had actually, there was one writer I knew. I just didn't know at the time until I opened up my mouth and started talking to my family about this. But there was an in law who had spent years looking for an agent, sitting in, getting rejection after rejection. The family had said, talk to her. And I'm like, I'm not going through that. If I am going to just publish it myself and see what happens. And that's just more about my personality. I'm influenced by my ex-husband. Just get it done.
No, I totally understand that. And, querying for agents was rough. That was a kind of, I've heard people describe it as soul crushing, and it kind of is. Um, and I
Doing a
got
poor
close
job.
a couple of times, and that made it worse because it's like to get close, but then it was so it's like, yeah, I'm
Yeah,
really happy with my decision to self-publish.
yeah, and rightly so. You know, the people who are in charge of things like your music. I'm gonna go back to this because how often do you hear the same song on the radio over and over and over and again, or you hear about musicians who were turned away because their sound didn't fit what was being marketed? And I would assume that the same principles would apply to book publishers. Well, our audience isn't interested in this, so we're going to reject your manuscript because it's not what we're looking for. Well, I'll tell you, I get bored with the stuff on the radio. Half the stuff on the radio I don't care for. Sometimes there are popular books I will like, yes. Um, but sometimes the best stuff is the stuff that's off the radio. It's the stuff that's on the CD that the record companies or the people, the powers that be, refuse to play. And I'm like, this is the better stuff. What are you doing? Oh, it doesn't meet our marketing things. So, same thing for books. Sometimes the best stories are being missed because it doesn't fit into this little box over here. And
It's
yeah,
so true. It doesn't sort of fit into that category. I had an agent who said, you know what, I really love your story, but I don't think I can sell it to a publisher because they're really kind of looking for sex, drugs, and rock and roll right now. And I was like, okay, well, it doesn't have any of that. And
right.
then I had another publisher from a romance company who's like, I love this book. Can you turn it into a romance novel? And I said, with all due respect to romance novels, it's not a romance novel. And I don't, that's not what I set out to write. And it's not what the book is. So you're right. You have to, with self-publishing, you get to create your own category when, a book maybe doesn't fit into that little box, like you said. And it
Yeah.
doesn't mean that readers aren't going to enjoy it or find things in it that they love. Um,
Yeah.
you know, give them more choices. That's my philosophy.
Exactly. I agree. It's
Yeah.
your voice without the distortions. Yeah.
That's a great. I love that.
You can kind of
Nice.
dispute. They're trying to manipulate
It
your
really
sound, and
is.
your sound is your sound. And for me, one of the things I wanted, first of all, I love multiple genres. So I've got stuff that's science fiction. I've got something that technically could be centered romance, but I wanted something that wasn't your typical fluffy romance. I wanted something that was real, a story between a husband and wife who maybe were being disconnected, even though they never left each other. They were still loyal to each other. I wanted something that was romance within a marriage that needed maybe some tweaking to become closer. And I wanted it to be clean. I didn't want any sex scenes or whatever. It can be implied, sure, okay, you know,
Yeah.
but that was my vision because that's what I would like to find on a shelf. I don't necessarily want to read about someone's sex life. I just want a good story. So that's what I felt needed.
Exactly. And a lot of the romance novels that I read, um, and they're, as you know, they're super popular. But generally, the protagonist is in her 20s or 30s, and that isn't a story that I wanted to write now or that I necessarily can relate to.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. And the audience is out there. They just maybe haven't found what they're looking for because all that's being marketed to them is the same old that's always been marketed.
I think that's true for movies too, right? When you think about
I
it
would
and you
agree.
think about the kind of movies that end up in the theaters, it's probably why, streaming and having so many other more choices. It's not just the convenience of being in your living room in your PJs, but also that, you know, you can find something for everybody, right? That appeals to what it is that you're looking for. So I really understand how all of that streaming content got so popular.
Absolutely. Well, and here's the thing too, going back to this lack of originality in movies. Now, don't get me wrong, a good series, I'm 100% on board. If you want to do a trilogy or a double trilogy, whatever you would call that, great, fantastic. If it's a good, solid story, I'm right there with you. But there comes a point where a series maybe you should consider stopping. That's one movie too far. Find a new subject, find a new story, because this one you've beaten, it's a dead horse.
It's really true. I've kind of forced my husband to watch the Bridgerton series because I love the clothing and the period settings, and so he watches them with me. But we're now in the fourth season, and I know that he's becoming kind of a little bit more bored with it. And I have to admit that I'm like, okay, it's not quite as interesting for me as the first three seasons were. And you have to think that, yeah, maybe it's run its course. I'm not sure. And apologies to all the Bridgerton fans out there because there's still, a lot to enjoy watching about it. It's such great escape. But for me, the fourth, and certainly for him too, the fourth season is just it's missing something for me.
Yeah, I get you. And I was thinking more about movies than TV series, but still, the
Oh,
principles apply.
yes. Yes. Yeah, exactly. I think maybe, Hollywood feels that they are better off with a sure bet than
Oh,
taking a
I'm
risk on
sure.
something, which must be why all those, remakes keep happening. They feel that they're
I'm sure.
safer. But you're right.
Well, I
They
mean, look
can
at Disney. Disney keeps
outlive
bringing back the same
themselves.
stuff and just in a different version, and yeah, for that very reason, I'm sure. And a
Exactly.
remake sometimes can be a good thing. New audience, different spin on a story. Sometimes it works, but sometimes it just
Yeah.
really doesn't.
It's true. Yeah, it's really true. Do you find yourself going to the movies very often, or are you more of a stay at home and watch stuff?
I used to love going to the movies pre-COVID. Pre-COVID, there were a lot of great movies to choose from. And then we hit that span of about 4 years, maybe five, where the movies, there were a few good ones, but not very many, because of course the restrictions. And somehow it's like they lost their rhythm, they lost their footing. I don't know, but where there would be multiple really great movies in a year, now it's kind of like, this is not the quality, this is not the type of story, there's not enough in enough to tempt me to go to the movie theater. Not to mention the prices. Um,
Yeah,
to pay that much
yeah,
for a movie that I'm not excited about, not so much. So maybe
yeah.
now they're
And
getting back
especially
on
when you
track,
know
but
that
the
it's good.
price, yeah. I just wish that they would revisit the way that they price movies because it's always been my understanding that what we're paying for the movie ticket itself goes, at least I would say 90% goes to the whoever made the movie, the company that made the movie. It doesn't go to the movie theater that you're actually at. They
Right,
make their money off of concession. So what once
right.
was maybe a $20 evening, I remember when I used to go to the Dollar Theater. Movie be out for a little while, but Dollar Theater, you got on the big screen, you still had that experience. It was all good. But even like for me, $20 for an evening out, I would pay that much for between a movie and concessions. I'd be totally fine with that. $50 though, I have a problem with for one person.
I get
Um,
you.
yeah.
Yeah,
So that's
I totally hear that.
yeah. Unless there's a really big reason why I specifically want to see it on the big screen, I'll wait. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's my feelings on the matter. What about you?
I Same here. You know, I used to go to movies, used to take myself to a movie almost every Friday night after I had divorced and I was single. And there was just this wonderful freedom about, oh, I can pick the movie I want and I can go at the time I want. And going to a movie by yourself felt okay versus
Yeah,
going to dinner by myself. I didn't really like that. But I could go to a movie and I saw a lot of movies in the course of, 2, 3 years, and I loved it. Then things changed, and now, like, I'm lucky to get to 2 or 3 movies a year. The Oscar nominations come, and I'm like, oh, we should go see more of those movies, but then often we don't.
I get
So
you.
I think we're probably pretty typical.
Could be.
It's
Could
mostly
be.
younger people.
Yeah. And, I don't think it's our age necessarily, unless it's just about our age in terms of what we're willing to watch versus not watch. You know, I feel like my parents at my age, it wasn't about the content at the theater, it was about the noise of the theater. Um, they didn't really like the volume of the movies. I don't think I'm at that stage yet. I think it really is about the quality of the content.
Yeah, I think that it is that. And, the streaming, I don't think young people are going to the movies like they used to either. I know that my son doesn't go to the movies very often, or if he does, it's a matinee because of the prices. And to go on a date for him, for that's a $50 or more evening for a date with the concessions. So that's a lot.
Yeah, they really need to revisit their pricing, either by splitting it with the theater so that it includes, you know, there just needs to be, they need to revisit that to make it affordable because otherwise they're basically signing their own death sentence. It'll be the end of an era. I mean, movies became popular what in the early 1900s, maybe 1910, 1920, I believe, 30 at the latest. But basically, we're talking about less than 100 years that they've gone from being affordable, family entertainment, wonderful night date thing to another 5, 10 years, especially if the prices creep up to potential non-existence because they
And,
price
I
themselves
was
out.
thinking about it. It's really true. And yet, when you think about it, like one of the beautiful things about going to a film in the theater, not just the big screen and the maybe sometimes too loud sound, but it all comes back to also to that theme of community, right? And there isn't anything like seeing a film in a theater with other theater goers around you. To me, their laughing makes me laugh more. The, silence during heavy scenes or sad things, like you feel that community emotion, and that's very powerful. You don't get that from sitting in your living room in front of a TV. So I hope movies never go away because to me that's the best part of seeing a movie in a theater.
I would agree. I would even take it a step further and say that some of my most cherished memories have been movies that we were excited about and that a group of friends, like a large group of friends, would go together at the same time. So it wasn't just random strangers watching it, it was some of the people I knew and loved best that we could talk about it afterwards. I will never forget the excitement of here I am, this girl in Texas, going to downtown Kaufman, Texas to the movie theater that used to be there. A good 30, 40, maybe 50 of friends that I knew going to this theater to see Batman in 1989 with Michael Keaton. I mean, that is one of my most cherished memories. And I remember reading the articles and that, oh, Michael Keaton, he's not going to be any good, blah, blah, blah. But we were still excited to go see it. And wow, we were excited even afterwards because he was the most amazing Batman. But I mean, those are the things that young people today may not get to have that type of experience, or young people of the future may not, because it won't be within reach. And what a pity.
Yeah, I love hearing about that, that it is such a great memory for you. I have some of those as well, and you're right. I hope it doesn't go away for that reason, that shared experience that makes it that much more powerful.
Absolutely.
Cool.
And I would be remiss if I didn't say to those movie producers out there that, maybe check out an indie artist, an indie book, because you might get a fresh story and fresh idea for a movie instead of the same old, same old. Just saying. Have to put that out there, right?
There you go. I love that.
Perhaps the book by
Yeah,
Kristine Jensen.
exactly. I think Wednesday Club would make a wonderful movie. So there you
There
go.
you go. Exactly. Well, we're to a point where I'm going to get the random question out from our previous guest. Um, and let me see. So the last guest asked the question, the world today that we live in, it's so divided. People are angry, there's strife. So how do you see your role as a creator in this complicated world?
Hmm. That's a lovely question, actually. Um, and I think the answer to that kind of lies in my book, Wednesday Club, because the women, um, the women in that group, although it wasn't as divided as it was now, it was 1963. And there were things happening there. The Vietnam War was just starting, the civil rights movement was starting. Women were starting to talk about, working outside the home. And here's a teenage city girl. And somehow they were able to work through the differences that they all had and become friends with one another and support one another and help this young displaced woman find a sense of home and family. One of the things that I'm trying to do with the book and with my blogs is to encourage women to start their own Wednesday clubs, to find community. Because I think when you get to know somebody on a personal level, that's when some of these differences and this divisiveness kind of doesn't matter anymore, right? We're all humans. We all have some of the same issues and problems and needs and desires. And when you meet and know someone on a personal basis, that's how you overcome those and learn to love one another.
You're so
So
right.
that would be my answer to that.
I really like that. It's a wonderful answer. And I know that you
Thank
had
you.
taken a note before we got started about a question that you were going to leave for our next guest. Do you have
It's
that
kind
question?
of along this it's kind of along the similar lines. And
Okay.
so my question is, how do you stay hopeful when
Hmm.
you find yourself in difficult times?
Hopeful when you find yourself in difficult times. I pity the person whoever reads my notebook other than me because my handwriting is atrocious, but at least I managed to somehow figure it out anyway. So thank you for that question. Do you have anything left that you would like to share with our audience before we close out our show?
I've just had a marvelous time. I've loved getting to know you a little bit more, Zoe, and having this conversation. And we're friends now, like we talked about. So I hope that I have a
Fabulous.
chance to talk with you again and learn even more about you. It's been really fun.
Well, it's always a pleasure for me. I love meeting you and all the others. And, I have no doubt as long as you put another book out there and as long as you're working with Mickey, or even if you weren't working with Mickey, tag me anyway. But I have a feeling we'll
Okay,
talk again.
I hope
So,
so.
yeah. Well, thank you
Have
for
a great
joining us. We're going
evening.
to close out this program. Thank you for joining us. Please check out Kristine Jensen's work and check out the Wednesday Club. The book is actually called The Wednesday Club, right?
Wednesday Club, a novel.
Okay, thank you, because me and my memory, not so good. So thank you very much for joining us. Please like, subscribe, share with friends. Thank you so much.